Welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. The Pharmacy Leaders Podcast is a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, with interviews and advice on building your professional network, brand, and a purposeful second income from students, residents, and innovative professionals.
Hey, welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast. I'm going to, again, take a little bit of a break in terms of doing some interviews. I've got a couple that'll be coming up soon, but I wanted to talk about something that came out from Pharmacy Week. They talked a bit about the AACP applications from the last cycle. So this cycle is just ending, although I think you can still apply to pharmacy school by June 1st for this fall. I've seen many schools extend their deadlines, and you'll see why in a little bit. But I want to talk about the article that he has and the numbers that Kevin has, and then I'll talk about what I did with an Excel file and compare this year's numbers to last year's numbers, and you'll be a little surprised who's at the bottom and who's at the top as well. Okay, so first thing, this is all from the AACP website. They publish the numbers of how many students are applying, how many students are getting in, and all of that stuff. The big thing to take away before we even start is to know that this in no way represents the actual number of applicants. So it used to be like you apply to 5 schools and then it's down to like 4 schools, and it may be even less than that because so many students are going in and doing that early decision, which I think is an absolutely horrible thing to do. Early decision locks you into a school regardless, and you wouldn't be able to apply till the next cycle. If you were in a situation of high demand and low supply, where, let me make sure I got that right. If you were in, low demand, so pharmacy schools want pharmacy students. So there is a high demand for pharmacy students and a low supply. But you're locking yourself in early and saying, okay, I'm going to go to the school because of fear that, maybe you won't get accepted after all if you go into the pool. And it's nice to know ahead of time that you're going to get in. But what that does is it also reduces applications, because if you're only applying to one school, then that's going to reduce the applications. And if that's the case and all the schools are doing this, then these numbers don't really tell us a ton about what's going on with pharmacy schools. So, but let's look at it. It was let's see, in terms of enrollment went down slightly from 64,300 to 63,800. So doing the math, that's only 500 fewer students enrolled in pharmacy school in 2017. So although we're seeing precipitous drops in applications, that doesn't seem to gel with what's actually happening in terms of the people going to school. There's still about an equal number going to school, and it's actually higher than it was in 2012. So as applications are diving, somehow the number of students has actually gone up by 1,300. And yes, I get it. There's other schools, there are new schools, and that would mean there's more students. But I'm just saying that the dive that applications are taking in no way seems to correlate to this number of students that are enrolled. So enrollment is actually flat right now, though I hear at individual schools there is some decline in the enrollment. Looking at the fall enrollments, so down a little bit, barely 300 or 400 from 2016 to 2017. So again, the enrollments are not dropping as these applications are dropping. So there might be another cause for it. Again, I really think it's got to be that people are just saying, I want to go to this school, and now that there's a school much closer to me, I can do that. So for example, California Health Sciences University is in Fresno. And prior to that, you either had to go to LA or San Fran. And California is a ginormous state. And then somebody said, well, let's put a pharmacy school in the middle in the Central Valley. And the Central Valley, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, is much more like the Midwest, to be honest. It's very agricultural. and people are responding to that. And I think CHSU was one of the schools that either got a few more applicants or let me check my spreadsheet that I did. I want to say, yeah, so they actually gained 6% because of their positioning. And so if I'm a pharmacy school dean, I would actually expand. And I'm thinking about my alma mater, and I do love Maryland, but they just said that they were shutting down, or it was an email and somebody reported it, they were shutting down their Shady Grove campus, and then everything was moving to Baltimore. I would have actually done the opposite. I would have reduced the size of Baltimore, and I would have kept Shady Grove, because what students are saying by these applications and what they're doing, and I'll get into it, is that these students are saying, we're going to apply to these new schools, and we're going to go to these new schools because these new schools are closer to us. And I don't know why this is any surprise to pharmacy schools. I mean, when you ask students why they picked which appy, they're like, well, that's where I had housing, or that's close to where I live. So it makes sense that if they're going to spend, 5 weeks somewhere, and that's how they do it, well, it might be how they spend 4 years somewhere, and it's going to be close. So generally, we see students applying regionally rather than nationally, and I'll talk a little bit about that later too. So we are up from 2012, 129 colleges, up to 142. Yeah. Anyway, I don't even want to go into that. We belabored that too much. And Kevin likes to use red and capitals and bold. And I thought it was because, red, if you're in the red, you're, not profitable. And if you're in the black, then you are. But I think it's just a highlight because that wouldn't make sense to do it the other way here. But anyway, so over last year, there were 6,000 fewer applications. But I don't know if that necessarily means there are fewer students applying to the schools. I just don't know. The numbers will come out, or they do a really good job of explaining the numbers at AACP, and I think it's in Boston this year in July. So if you really, really are tied to applications and tied to pharmacy schools, that's the meeting you would definitely want to go to. Now, obviously, if we've gone from 112,000 in 2011 to 72,000 and lost, that many applications, sure, there are fewer people applying, but I just don't know how many. And what they did, and I don't know why you would stop, well, actually, I know exactly why you would stop doing this. They used to say how many applications were per student. So in 2012, it was 6.4, 2013, 5.6, 2014, 5.5. And then they stopped publishing how many applications per student. But if that was continuing to decline, we may be looking at 100% or moving towards 100% acceptance to pharmacy school, which is crazy. Though that's how they used to do it. They would accept many more than they would graduate. And that's not the case now. Right now, attrition's around 12%, so 88% of the time you're going to make it to the end. Talking nationally, obviously, at different schools it's different, but anyway, so going to the applications, we see that there's this decrease, massive decrease from 2011 to 2017, and there are a number of things to explain that. But in terms of enrollment, we saw 11,931 in 2011, and then we're at 14,502, and so we did lose a little bit of enrollment, but that's only 54 people. So what's happening is that either we're leveling off. Or students are just saying, I'm going to go to a pharmacy school if there's one near me. And so if pharmacy schools want to do something to, continue to get students, they should be expanding, not contracting. There was this movie back in, I don't know if it was late 80s or early 90s. It had to be late 80s, Secret of My Success. And it was Michael J. Fox. And the big kind of crux of the business deal that they were making within the movie was, someone's trying to take us over, so we should sell our stock, create a war chest of cash, and then we'll buy our stock and we'll protect it. But what Michael J. Fox's character thought was that no, we need to expand. We need to expand so that we're so strong we can't get taken over by someone else. And I'm making a huge prediction here, but I actually think that it would make more sense for schools to start taking other schools over. And the reason I say that is because if you've already got a school, especially if you've already got your setup for online, or you've got your setup for delivering content to multiple campuses, then it's just a matter of becoming that region's campus rather than that state's campus. And we've always kind of done it by state. So if I was dean of pharmacy school, I would actually look to acquire another pharmacy school that maybe was a quality pharmacy school, but was having a bit of trouble with enrollment. And I've never seen this before, where this many pharmacy schools have under 100 applications. So that's just crazy talk to me. So anyway, the attrition rate. So attrition rate continues to go up. And that's understandable. The more expensive school is, the more difficult it is to make it all the way to the end. And I know that many people say, well, they're letting anybody in. But the data from last year, or the last year's AACP, I don't think showed that. I mean, the grades went down like marginally, like from like 3.4 to like 3.34 or something like that. But it doesn't show that. Although I am seeing PCAT scores that are really questionable across the board. But in terms of attrition rate, we're still seeing that students are finishing, and that the attrition rate was near zero, around the 2000s, and now we're closer to 12%. But I know a lot of people want to blame that on the quality of student that's coming in, but the data don't show that it's the quality of the student. It's just that if you try to charge someone $60,000, which is the average now for school, versus what it was back then, it's just a lot harder to finish because you just don't have the money. And the other thing is I think that the bigger the number, the more likely you're going to turn around and just not make it to the end. And again, that's just my own opinion. So the number of post-bac PharmDs, well, Florida stopped its program, or I think they're done taking new people, so that makes sense. And really, there just aren't that many bachelors around anymore that I know of that are interested in this PharmD anymore. So because now they've created a situation where it's got to be PharmD and residency, and you can't offer PharmD residency as part of a program. Let's see. Masters, I don't. Okay, and then first professional degrees in terms of percentage of women versus men. So this was a little bit interesting. I mean, it seems like less men are going into the profession as a percentage. So not just we know that women are going. There are more women in pharmacy than men by about 2 to 1, but it looks like men are choosing other fields rather than go into pharmacy. So just kind of an interesting thing there. And then from my spreadsheet, so what I did was I took the data from this cycle, which was the 2016-2017 cycle, and matched it to the 2015-2016 cycle, and said, okay, well, which schools lost the most students? And I bet you can't guess which one lost the most. It is absolutely, and I double-checked the numbers, so the numbers are right. So the only thing I could think is that maybe AACP misreported them. I just, that this school had this happen, I just can't, it just boggles my mind. But they did make a huge change, which would make it make sense, but it doesn't make sense. It went down. It should have gone up. So at the very bottom, the school that lost the most students is the University of California, San Francisco. According to U.S. News and World Report, it is the number 3 school in the country. Now, let's kind of unpack that. That's just craziness. So the University of California, San Francisco announced that they're going from the 4-year to the 3-year because then that way in 4 years you can get to residency. And of all the cities in the country, San Francisco would be a city that you only want to live in for 3 years based on the price of housing and things like that. But that number is just enormous, that you could go down to 541. And still, I mean, they have a very small class size, if I remember right, around 90 or something like that. So they're still getting plenty of applications per spot, and I assume that, somebody got accepted to UCSF, number 3 school in the country, they would take it. Puerto Rico took a huge hit as well, going from 160 to 97 applications for the next school year. And that's understandable. I mean, they had that tragedy last year with the hurricane, and obviously, hopefully, they'll be able to bounce back. And then Campbell, I think, is in North Carolina. They took a hit, down 36%, down 286 applications. And then Findlay, I think is that another one of the Ohio ones? Because I think there are a ton of Ohio ones. I could be wrong. I want to make sure I get this right. Pharmacy school. There's a map, but it's kind of confusing where everything is. Yeah, so it's in Findlay, Ohio. And then Cedarville went under 100 as well, losing 33%. And I feel like that is also an Ohio school. Let's check. Cedarville University. Yeah. Yep, Ohio. So Campbell in North Carolina, Findlay and Cedarville in... is Campbell North Carolina? I think so. Pretty sure. Pharmacy. All these privates makes it so much harder. No, not Campbell's Pharmacy. Campbell. Yeah, it's North Carolina. Okay. I don't know how to pronounce the HUSSON one. They lost 30%. Regis lost 30%, or 28%. Regis, 28% in Colorado. Notre Dame lost a ton, down 30%. And there was that job available for a recruiter for Notre Dame, and that's the one in Maryland. Oregon State lost about a quarter. Charleston lost a quarter. Oklahoma lost a quarter. Here's another surprise. University of Washington, which is ranked number... Well, I don't know how they did this, but there is... I feel like they just... There's no way this couldn't have happened on purpose. There's a 7-way tie for 9th. Like, that's just weird. But Washington... number 9 school in the country, lost 25% of its applications. And I'm wondering if a lot of them were Californians that had to come out for Washington, pay out-of-state tuition, and now that private school tuition and that tuition's about the same. Appalachians down 24.3%, Shenandoah down 23%, Idaho State down 22%, Georgia down 22%, Incarnate Word, New England, Toro, New York, PCOM, Georgia, Midwestern, Downers Grove, Houston, Xavier, Palm Beach, Atlantic, and Rhode Island all down between 19 and 20%. So the numbers are really, really, a lot of them have gone, there's a lot of fewer applications, but, that says, okay, well, people aren't interested in pharmacy anymore, but kind of going back to the data again, well, the same number of students are enrolling. So kind of going back to my whole point of the whole thing is that I don't necessarily know that fewer people are going to go to pharmacy school. I think they're going to take just as many, and what they're doing is they're taking them on one application and done, rather than having the much larger competition that we used to have. You have a ton of different applications. You've got to do 6, 7, 8 applications to make sure you get in pharmacy school. Now, kind of the last point I wanted to make was, who are the big winners, as you could say, and the thing is that the way that this works is if you had a dip and then you came back up, then it would look like, oh my gosh, you've got so many more students than you had last year. But Marshall B. Ketchum, I think that's one of the new schools, so I don't think that really counts because obviously they're going to have a huge increase because they didn't have them before. And is that another California one? I feel like that's the Fullerton, California one. And then Larkin gained 142. So I'm not sure where they are. Let's see, school. Is it Miami? I feel like. Yeah. So another one of the new ones, I think. I don't know. Should do some research before I start talking. Yeah, it's in North Miami. So big competition for all the Florida schools. But I didn't see that Florida was really losing a ton. Actually, it's the other way around. More people are trying to go to school in Florida. So kind of round out, University of Colorado got a ton of new students. St. John's got applications. St. John's got the applications. Hawaii, Florida A&M, Illinois at Chicago, North Dakota State, Samford, Philadelphia, Michigan, Buffalo, Butler, and then anything else is kind of less than 10% of an increase, or it is a decrease. So anyway, wanted to kind of just talk about that, and that although we're seeing, this number is saying we're getting fewer applications, I just don't know what that says, because we're not necessarily changing. The way that people go to school is changing. They're choosing to pay for one school, which I think is penny wise and pound foolish. It makes sense that you only want to pay one application fee, and if your grades are high enough, I think they even waive it and they give it to you for free. But what you've done is you've just said, okay, well, instead of having a competitive market for me as a great student, I'm just going to take the first one that takes me. And I get it. There's fear that you're not going to get accepted, but the play in this environment is to apply to many schools, then see if you can find equally matched schools, and then see which one will provide you with the best financial resources, because the average student's graduating with 160 right now, and the way to combat that is the way to succeed in this market is to do the best job on the way in of securing the financial aid you need to get you through school, because it'll also make sure the less you're going to owe, the more chance you're going to make it through. So anyway, that's my 2 cents, but don't feel like there's going to be this huge drop in students coming out of pharmacy schools. I think it's just there's this huge number of pharmacy students that are getting in on the first try, and they're just not having to put a lot of more applications in there.
Support for this episode comes from the audiobook Memorizing Pharmacology, a relaxed approach. With over 9,000 sales in the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia, it's the go-to resource to ease the pharmacology challenge. Available on Audible, iTunes, and Amazon.com, in print, ebook, and audiobook. Thank you for listening to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. Be sure to share the show with the hashtag #PharmacyLeaders.